Good day and welcome to FDM, the channel dedicated to Ferra data models. Well, it is Friday and it is time for our Are We Winning update for the week. I've already updated all the figures and all the reports, and I'm going to jump straight into the results. So first of all, let's look at new infections. Well, there you have it. Let me zoom in a bit to show you more closely what's happening. Just to go through what we are looking at. This red line is a model I've built as a type of a benchmark, and we should be doing better than this model. If we can beat this model, then we are winning. If we lose relative to this model, then we are not winning the battle against COVID-19. And I started running this model after calibrating it on this date. It's the 6th of April or so. So this gray area that you see here is when the model sort of went live. Now, the figures you see here are those of the world, this green line, the smooth figure, 7-day moving average, and then that light green behind it, sort of stitching its way just below the model is the actual reported figures. Now what I did on this day was to calibrate the levels. I calibrated the levels of the world, South Africa and the US to that of the model. So on this day everything is set equal to the model, and here I don't look at levels, I look at differences. So if we are below the model here, if we are below the red line, then we are winning. We are doing better than the model, and to some extent we are winning. Although trend is also important, and if we are above it, we are struggling. So if you look at the US, for example, the US, they had a really bad start. They initially did quite poorly, and that continued for some time. But recently, they've been coming down dramatically. It seems the thing is blowing over there, and it's, although lately as they open up, it's stabilizing a bit. While South Africa, initially we did extremely well. But as I've argued before as well, we should have done better here. We should have gotten a better hold on the virus. This should have gone down lower during the lockdown period. But pretty soon this thing started escalating. At the moment, South Africa is really struggling. Relative to the world, relative to the model, relative to the US, we are really struggling at the moment. So let's look at the figures again relative to population size. So that was an arbitrary report we looked at, where everything was set equal on a specific date to compare the relative performance from that date onwards. Now let's look at the performance relative to population size. So here we look at the same figures, only relative to population size. So the model is relative to the population size of the world, South Africa relative to population size, and the US the same. Here you can see the US performing dismally initially. Huge outbreak. This is New York, of course, and they are fighting with the virus for quite some time, but it seems they are moving in the right direction at the moment. As they're loosening and opening up a bit, you can see a bit of an uptick, but nothing to worry about. At least, although relative to South Africa and the world, they are not doing well. At least they're moving in the right direction, and rapidly so. So that is encouraging for them. South Africa, just the opposite. Relatively speaking, we are doing pretty well. We've got a very low infection rate, and well below that of the world, well below that of the US, but it's picking up, and it's picking up fast. It's really escalating here. So let's look at the figures, the death figures as well. Now, this is something I started doing since last week. What I'm doing here is I'm using the reported deaths to also give an indication of the infection rate. And the argument goes like this, extremely simple. If we record one fatality today, and the fatality rate is 1%, that means 2 weeks ago 100 people were infected. So 2 weeks ago 100 people were infected, and of those, because the fatality rate is 1%, one person didn't make it, and that ends up as a fatality that's reported. And here you can see the same figures, but now, because the US figures are so high, it swamps out everything. It sort of, everything here has become so small because of the scaling of this figure. And this is the projected infection rate using US reported deaths. That's the death projection, if you want, the calculation I just explained. And this is huge. It's much higher than the US actual figures. And yes, the figures should be somewhere in between. I think the actual, this is probably over-reported, probably quite a bit over-reporting happening here. And this is probably under-reporting. I mean, not everybody gets tested. So the real figure should be in between here somewhere. But this gap is so wide. This looks like about 5 times this one. This gap is so wide that I think the fatality rate is too high. A way to close this gap is to lower the fatality rate of 1%, make it 0.5% or 0.1% or something like that. Let's say 0.2. Let's say we lower this 5 times to 0.2. Then it's probably going to be much closer. So that's encouraging. I think a 1% fatality rate is grossly overestimating the actual fatality rate. Now let's zoom in on South Africa because it's getting scaled out of this graph. So if we look at South Africa, this is the figure, and there you see pretty much what I've discussed. There's the model. Here you see our lockdown level 5, very strict lockdown, which was lifted there. Now we're in lockdown level 4 from then onwards. And as the lockdown happened, the figures lowered quite a bit, but not enough. This should have been more. So I think the lockdown was necessary. Make no mistake, I think the lockdown really was necessary. But I think it also didn't really achieve what it should have achieved. And I think the next lockdown, if ever there is one, will be even worse. So lockdowns don't work, or not work as intended. But there you have our figures, our infection rate, the reported figures, and then to augment this infection rate, also the infection rate implied by the reported deaths. And again, somewhere in between. And this one is a bit farther away from the official one. So a way to lower this is to work with a fatality rate lower than 1%. So again, a bit of good news. Maybe the fatality rate is not 1%, maybe it's a bit less. Well, that's it for now. Thank you. See you next time. Bye.